Hi, Pastor Matt here, once again launching out on a new season of Ask TBC. So we started Beautiful Design this past week, and throughout this series, our hope is that if you have a question or something you'd like more clarity on based off of the last weekend sermon, that you would just ask that question on Twitter or Facebook using the hashtag AskTBC. And then on Tuesday morning, I'm going to come in here and answer these questions, or at least a few of these questions, and then we'll get them up on the web on Tuesday afternoon. And our hope is that you might be encouraged and that clarity might be provided, and in that clarity you might be emboldened in what we're teaching concerning manhood and womanhood in this series. So with that said, we've got three questions this week. I'm going to try to answer all three of those. The first one we got in says, gender today is defined as a mere social construct. I used to think it was just a physical attribute. Do you think it should be a bit of both? Well, I would probably change the wording on that. And what I mean by change the wording is I don't know that I like the wording of social construct because regardless of social constructs, those will vary depending on where you are in the world. And yet, the biblical obligations of what manhood is and what womanhood is would be unchanging regardless of kind of set social constructs. So it's definitely both. There would definitely be physical attributes involved, but then there would also be biblical obligations on top of that. So you could be, as we've oftentimes said, a boy in a grown man's body or a little girl in a grown woman's body. So you could have the behavior, the social constructs, the failure to live up to the biblical obligations that would have you behaving as a child, despite the fact that your physical body had developed into the physical part of being a man or the physical part of being a woman. And so that's how to answer that first one. The second one is a bit more complex. Is it possible to reconcile evolution with Genesis, specifically the fact that God created man and woman distinctively in his image? So I think there are two parts to that question. The first one is way too long to answer in this format. Can you reconcile Genesis with evolution? Well, I think in some ways you can, in some ways you can't. There's a great book by a guy named John Sailhammer called Genesis Unbound. And what he does in that book is he does a lot of work in the Hebrew with that word there, beginning, which is reshet in the Hebrew. And the word reshet is, it never refers to a specific moment when it's used in the Hebrew Bible, but rather always is kind of addressing an indiscriminate period of time. And so the examples we have on that is in Genesis 10:10, in the beginning of Nimrod's reign. And so it's this kind of early part of Nimrod's life. We're not sure how many years it is. We're not sure of the amount of space that took place there. And we also see it in the life of Job. We also see it in multiple other locations where in the Hebrew Bible, that word reshit is used to talk about this period of time that could be 5 years, that could be 20 years, that could be 40 years. So it's not this specific moment of time. So one of the things that Sailhammer argues is that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, that in the beginning was God creating really all of the universe, and we don't know how long that actually took. But then starting in verse 2, when he begins to create, what Sailhammer will argue is that he's creating a land for his people. So what you read from there. So I think in that way, I don't really buy into theistic evolution, so I wouldn't go that far. I know there's some really smart men smarter than I am, that can go there. I just can't, as a matter of my own reading of the Bible and my own kind of wrestle with what science is saying today as opposed to what they've said in other periods of time, land there. And so ultimately, in the first part of your question, there are certain ways I would be more a historic creationist as opposed to a theistic evolutionist. But as you clarified your question about can you reconcile evolution with God making man and woman distinctively, No, you simply can't. You can't reconcile what the Bible's teaching about God creating man and woman in His image, distinct from all other creation, in the theory of evolution, which is one of the places where there's just going to be a great deal of tension between Christians and non-Christians, and even there'll be arguments within the evangelical community about that. And so I don't know that I answered your question, but maybe given you enough to go on. And then love this question, can't wait to answer it. You mentioned the village being a place that will extend grace to those who struggle with sexual confusion. What does that look like? What do you do to help people like this find healing? Well, the way we've kind of historically always talked about the village, at least in my 12 years here, is that we wanted to be a place where it was okay to not be okay. We don't want you to stay there, but we want this to be a place where it's okay to not be okay. And so regardless of who you are at the village church, you've got struggles in your life, you've got parts of your flesh. There's indwelling sin that you're seeking to put to death. And so the brother or sister who struggles with gender identity, struggles with sexual disorders, we want to walk alongside of them graciously, patiently, surrounding them with strong accountability, teaching them the truth in love, and creating environments in which they can be honest about when they're struggling, when that triggers have been set off that are really causing them to wrestle. We want to walk faithfully with them as long as they're willing to fight. So like everyone else that's serious about following Jesus, a fighting against our fleshly urges is a part of what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. And so regardless of what the fight is, if a man or woman is willing to fight, they are welcome to fight in this place with all the support, love, and encouragement of the Christian community.